Hi, Karen here from projectmanagementsuccess.net, and we're here today with session 3 of our series PMBOK Explained. Session 3 is all about project management processes, and it's a jam-packed session, so let's get into it. Just as an overview, we'll be looking at project management processes, process interactions, project management process groups, project management knowledge areas, the mapping between the process groups and knowledge areas, and we'll be looking at descriptions of each of the process groups. Project management processes are a set of interrelated actions and activities performed to achieve a pre-specified outcome, and each process is characterized by its inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. In order for a project to succeed, you need to have selected the appropriate processes required to meet the objectives of the project. You need to use a defined approach adopted to meet the requirements of the project, comply with requirements to meet stakeholder needs and expectations, and importantly, balance competing demands of scope, time, cost, quality, resources, and risk to produce the specified outcomes of the project. Now, processes are performed by the project team, and they generally fall into two categories. Project management processes, and they're the processes that are all about running the project, versus product-oriented processes, and they're the processes that are all about delivering the products of the project. So the PMBOK guide deals with project management processes, how to run the project. In order to deliver product-oriented processes, obviously somebody needs to know how to create the actual products of the project. So the PMBOK guide, as we said, deals with the project management side of that, rather than the product-oriented side of it. Project managers and teams need to address each process, and the PMBOK guide describes the integration between processes, the interactions, and the purpose of each process. Project management processes are grouped into 5 categories, and they're known as project management process groups. And then each of those process groups has its own constituents of project management processes. So the 5 categories or 5 process groups are: number 1, initiating process group; number 2, the planning process group; number 3, executing process group; number 4, monitoring and controlling process group; and number 5, closing process group. In terms of project interactions, in practice, I mean, these sound like very nice logical steps, but in practice, the project management processes overlap and interact with each other. And the process groups and their individual processes should be looked at as more as a guide for applying project management knowledge and skills. And as we all sort of know, once we've been involved in project management for any length of time, that you do need to look at how you apply processes and tailor that to ensure that it suits the project. So this is just an example from the PMBOK manual of a diagram sort of showing you those process interactions. And you can see that there's the initiating process as you enter into the project or enter into a phase. There's the monitoring and controlling processes, the executing processes, planning processes, etc. And those things are sort of, it looks like a cyclical sort of thing to get the project going and get the project completed, and then you close off at the end. Now that sort of presents it as a nice sort of logical set of progressive components, but in reality, what you'll see is that there are process interactions, and those process groups interact during a phase and during a project at various points in time. So in terms of project management process groups, we've said there's 5 process groups. There are clear dependencies within each group. The process groups generally are performed in the same sequence for each project or each process or each project phase. Individual process groups and constituent processes are often iterated throughout a project. Process groups are not project phases, and that's a really important point. So for example, if you've got a project that involves several phases that you've designed or developed, such as a feasibility study, a design component, a build component, those project phases are not the same as the process groups that we've talked about. In fact, process groups would normally be repeated for each phase or sub-project within a project. In terms of processes and knowledge areas, there are 5 process groups, and there are 42 project management processes within those process groups. And they run across 9 project management knowledge areas, according to PMBOK. So just this table shows you the interrelationship between the mapping between the process groups and knowledge areas. So what you see here is across the top you'll see the project management process groups, and that's our initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling and closing. And down the left hand column we have the knowledge areas. Now it starts at 4, that's just because of the way the PMBOK manual is structured, but basically the knowledge areas are project integration management, project scope management, project time management, and I'll come back to that in a sec, project cost management, project quality management, project human resource management, project communications management, project risk management, and project procurement management. So they're the knowledge areas, and those process groups run across each of those knowledge areas. So you can see there, for example, in the item 4, project integration management, there's a component in the initiation process group called develop project charter. And then there's a process within the planning group, which is develop the project management plan. There's a process within executing, direct and manage the project execution. A process within the monitoring and controlling area, which is looking at obviously monitoring and controlling the project and performing integration change control or integrated change control. And in the closing area, there's the close project or the close phase. So this is a really good table in the PMBOK manual that actually has, demonstrates that sort of interaction between process groups and knowledge areas. So in terms of each of the process groups, we're going to just briefly run over them. Now, obviously, this is a far more detail is covered in the PMBOK manual, and far more detail will need to be known by you if you're looking at wanting to sit your PMBOK exam, your PMP exam, or know the methodology properly. But we're just going to run quickly over the top of each of those process groups. So the initiating process groups is all about processes performed to define a new project or a phase by obtaining authorization to start the project or the phase. So in this process group, the initial scope of the project or the phase is defined. Financial resources are committed, stakeholders are identified, a project manager is selected if they haven't been already, project charter and a stakeholder register is developed, and the charter becoming approved is almost like the signifying the end of that initiating stage. With initiating project phases, the initiation process group within a project phase is all about getting to a decision point. So in terms of if you've got a series of phases in your project, your initiating process group of each phase is all about determining whether you have the authorization to proceed on with the project or the phase. And this diagram from the PMBOK manual represents the main sort of outcomes of that phase and activities or processes of that phase, I should say. And the main thing here is all about developing the project charter. And then the other key process that occurs in here is identifying the stakeholders. In terms of the process groups, the planning process group is all about the processes that are performed to establish the total scope and effort, define and refine the objectives, and develop the actions required to attain the objectives. So this is all about, the major project management plan that needs to be developed is developed in this phase here. And that's the project management plan, and other project documents that are used to carry out the project are the main components here that we're looking at. And there's progressive detailing of the project management plan, which means that the planning and the documentation of a project are iterative and ongoing. Now, as you can see, this diagram here is also from the PMBOK manual, showing you the actual individual processes within the planning process group. And as you can see, there's quite a lot. The central component here is really developing the project management plan. And there's a whole bunch of processes, such as collecting requirements, defining scope, creating a work breakdown structure, planning procurements, planning risk management, planning quality, planning communication. These processes are all about getting the project management plan together. In terms of the executing process group, these are about processes performed to complete the actual work of the project that is defined in the plan to ensure that you satisfy the project specifications. So in executing, it's all about coordinating people and resources, integrating and performing activities of the project in accordance with the plan that you've set out. Now, obviously, plans need to be updated, re-baselined, things change, resource productivity, availability, there's unanticipated risk, there's issues, things need to change. So that's coming back to that idea of the project management plan and documentation as dynamic documents in the project that need to be maintained. This diagram from the PMBOK manual showing you in the executing phase, the main activity here, or main process, is about direct and to direct and manage the project execution. And here are all the constituent processes that make up that and contribute to that idea. So things like performing quality assurance, conducting procurements, managing stakeholder expectations, managing project teams, etc. So the monitoring and controlling process group is all about the processes required to track, review and regulate the progress and performance of the project, identify any areas in which changes to the plan are required and to initiate those changes. The key benefit here is that the project performance is observed and measured regularly and identifies any variances to the plan. So monitoring and controlling is imperative to make sure that what you're doing is actually in line with the plan and in line with your expected objectives and outcomes. So not only does monitoring and controlling work within a process, not only are you monitoring and controlling work within the process group, but you're monitoring and controlling work within the entire project. So this is obviously a key component to making sure your project's on track. And this is the diagram showing you the key components there in the middle, the monitor and control project work and perform integrated change control. And these are the constituent processes that contribute to that. Things like verifying the scope, controlling the scope, administering the procurements, monitoring and controlling the risk, controlling the costs are all about controlling your project and monitoring your project. Now the last process group is the closing group, and these are the processes within this group are performed to finalise all the activities across the process groups and formally complete the project or the project phase or the contractual obligations of the project. So when it's complete, this process group verifies that the defined processes are completed with all process groups to close off the project or close off the phase. So project or phase closure, some of the things that may occur when it's time to close the project off, close the phase off, is that the customer or the sponsor would have accepted the work or will accept the work. Post-project or phase end review is completed. Impacts of tailoring are recorded or lessons learned documented. Updates to the organisational process assets are applied. The project documents are archived or procurements are closed out. It's all about closing up the phase or closing up the project. And that's showing you the diagram there. Close project or close the phase and close any procurements associated. Wow, that's it for today. This wraps up session 3 of PMBOK Explained. What a massive session of project management processes. Now, as you can see, I've really given you the whirlwind, but this chapter in the PMBOK manual is really that is really the crux of it all. It's the introduction to what this whole thing is about. And as you can see, it's quite detailed, and we're going to cover off each area of the detail as we go on in the next sessions. So just to reiterate, this series, Project Management Success Series of PMBOK Explained, it's a 12-part series. We're going to give you the whirlwind tour of PMBOK, which is providing hopefully a practical summary of PMBOK processes. It's useful for beginners or experienced people wanting just a refresher. And I'm hoping that we're using simple, clear, down-to-earth explanation as we go. What this series isn't, it's not comprehensive coverage of the entire PMBOK manual, because obviously we won't have time to cover that, and it won't prepare you for your PMP exam, but I certainly can tell you where to get some help with that. Head on over to projectmanagementsuccess.net, and we've got lots of resources explained there that can help you to prepare for your PMP exam if that's your objective. So what's next? In PMBOK Explained Session 4, for the remaining sessions, they all look at each of the project management knowledge areas, and the processes that we've touched on today will be explored in greater detail within the context of the knowledge areas. So first up, we'll be looking at the first project management knowledge area we'll be looking at is project integration management, and that's all about processes and activities needed to identify, define, combine, unify and coordinate various processes and project management activities within the process groups. Now that all sounds very abstract, and hopefully it will become a lot more clear as we go. So hopefully if you join us for session 4, we'll get into project integration management, the first of the project management knowledge areas, and the processes that are relevant within that. Now obviously the reference that we're using for this presentation is the PMBOK Guide, the 4th edition, the Bible for PMBOK, and that's where all this information is coming from. So thank you very much for listening. It's Karen from projectmanagementsuccess.net, and I hope you're enjoying the series and finding it very helpful. We welcome your comments. You can always email at admin@projectmanagementsuccess.net. Head on over to the website www.projectmanagementsuccess and catch you over there. Thanks. Bye.